Hello, this is Mark from My Keys to Music. Thanks for joining me on this video. I had a hard time coming up with a name for this video because the concepts are so interwoven and difficult to explain and hard to find. But this particular video will allow you to take an external keyboard, perform it into a DAW like Logic Pro, and capture the MIDI. Then you'll be able to fix the MIDI and then have the MIDI play through back to the keyboard and have the audio of that keyboard, the actual sounds of the keyboard, being recorded as a final performance in Logic Pro. So you sort of go round trip with this. You perform it and it's capturing your MIDI, you fix it, and then the MIDI plays back and then you record the audio. So this is sort of like having your cake and eat it too. It prevents you from having to do a perfect performance right in as an audio recording. You can actually just record it in MIDI, fix a couple of things at the last minute, and things as simple as I made a mistake, I hit a few more extra notes, or you want to add a note in, or you want to change the velocity where you might have hit something a little too hard or a little too soft. Those tweaks are very easy to do in MIDI. The key here is I'll show you what buttons to click and how to get it so that it comes back as an audio file with the MIDI performing your keyboard, but then having the audio come back in and capture it as a final state. So before we get too deep into this, let's talk about the basics of getting things connected. You'll have your external keyboard, in my case it's a Nord Stage 3, and you're going to be going out from the USB of that keyboard to your computer, and that will supply the MIDI connections. That will be a two-way connection on a single USB cable, and you'll be able to drive MIDI into the computer to record MIDI, while at the same time the computer will be able to drive that MIDI back or send that MIDI signal back to your keyboard to playback. Now, if you're using GarageBand, you have to be aware that GarageBand has no such capability to play back the MIDI. Yes, you can record MIDI into GarageBand. That's no problem. It works fine in that direction. But GarageBand has a limitation where it cannot play the MIDI back to an external instrument. It can play MIDI back to its internal virtual instruments or plugins, but it cannot play back to external instruments. So that's the key distinction here. You need something like Logic Pro or another professional DAW on your Macintosh in order to play back that MIDI. All right, so next we need the audio interface. Now, without the audio interface, you can't convert analog audio, which this keyboard provides, into something digital that the computer understands. And that's why you need an audio interface. So we'll be using the Focusrite Scarlett 18i8. Here's the back of that interface. You can connect your keyboard to the front inputs if you'd like. You'll get more gain and more volume that way. But I like to leave the front inputs reserved for microphones or any on-the-fly things that I might need to connect. I like to have my stereo keyboards connected in the back. In my case, I connect my main keyboard into input 5 and 6. Keep in mind that you need to run stereo if you are in fact using a stereo keyboard. If you're using a monophonic synthesizer, then you can use a single input. But most professional keyboards today provide a stereo output, and you definitely want to use stereo in order to have the best sounding recordings. Next, your interface will have to be connected to the computer. Again, a single USB connection into the computer. So yes, the computer will actually have two USB connections going out to your equipment. You can use a USB hub, and this connection is also a two-way connection on a single cable. With this cable into the interface will be able to convert that analog audio into digital, and your computer will be able to play back the digital signal, and the interface will convert it back to analog audio that you'll be able to hear through headphones. And yes, you should connect your headphones directly into the audio interface. Now, you'll be tempted to put your headphones and connect that to the computer, like you normally do when you're listening to music or when you're doing any number of things on the computer. And you'll be tempted further to possibly use your favorite Bluetooth headphones or earbuds. But you don't want to do that when it comes to recording music if you are using external instruments, especially because it's introducing the notion of lag, where you play the keyboard and you won't hear it for milliseconds later. This causes more complexity and a lot of frustration for a lot of people. So I recommend you connect your headphones directly to your interface. And yes, your interface should have no problem being the go-between and the grand orchestrator of all things audio between your computer and your external equipment. That's its job. And then finally, on the computer itself, as I mentioned already, we'll be using Logic Pro, which is a professional DAW or digital audio workstation. Logic Pro will handle the recording of the MIDI, the playback of the MIDI, the recording of the audio, and the playback of the audio. It does everything. So now that we have the basic setup, let's go take a look at Logic Pro and getting this configured.
First, I want to set up Logic Pro. I'm going to create a brand new Logic Pro file, close whatever I had open before. I won't save it. Okay, and it's going to ask you what kind of track you want to create. So you want to go with an external MIDI track. Now this means that your keyboard has to be connected via the USB into your computer directly, or at least by way of an audio interface that includes MIDI capability. So the setup on this does require that. Now, you'll get this option here that under the details, and if the details aren't showing, you have to show it here with this little triangle. And you'll be tempted to click this to use external instrument plugin, but don't do that because you're going to be listening to your keyboard through your audio interface. That's where you should be listening to this. At least that's my opinion of where you should be listening to this. That way when you perform, there's absolutely no lag because you're not going through the computer first to kind of hear it secondary. You're hearing it right from the source. As you play the keyboard, it's going directly into the audio interface, and you can hear it with your headphones. So if you had this enabled, then you would hear the audio through your DAW, which would cause a potential lag. It also complicates things later on. So just leave that off. And then your destination is what you want to connect to your keyboard. So in my case, it's the Nord Stage 3. It's directly connected from the Nord Stage 3. The MIDI is connected from the USB out of the Nord Stage 3 into the computer. And then I can pick the channel. In this case, you could do all as far as what it'll pump out, but I'll just put channel 1, and I'll put my MIDI setting on the global setting for the Nord Stage 3 on channel 1. So 1 equals 1. And then you can leave the rest of the settings just as you see them here. Okay, we've got a track. We've got a MIDI track. What I like to do is I like to just drag this down a little bit to give it some breathing room, and that way I can kind of see the track as it's unfolding. Now at this point, it depends on whether you want to play with or without a metronome. I'm going to play without a metronome just to kind of really bring home the idea that MIDI can be free-flowing and you don't always have to be in a box. But generally speaking, when you record MIDI, you do want to be in a box so that your tempo will allow you to quantize the MIDI notes and get them lined up better if you so choose. Most people want to do it that way, so they record with the metronome so they can play in time, or they'll lay down a drum track and play against the drum track, again, recording your MIDI performance. In this case, I'm going to play kind of a little classical rendition of a piece with my own interpretation and with no metronome, just to kind of, like I said, bring home the idea. So as long as this MIDI track is set to record, you can do a quick test on your keyboard, just play a note. Now what I'm hearing is I'm hearing the actual keyboard through the audio interface, no different than if I didn't have the computer plugged in. But what I'm looking for when I click this is I'm looking for this light here at the bottom left, which indicates that it's receiving a MIDI signal. I also have lights here at the top in the little track window or the little monitor window up at the top. All right, and at this point, I'm going to take off the count in. I'm not even going to worry about counting in. I'm not going to worry about a metronome. And here we go. I'm just going to push the R key on the keyboard, which will set Logic Pro to record. So now it's time to edit our MIDI, and if you were listening, you probably caught a few of my mistakes, some of them really obvious, some maybe not so obvious. But now we can actually clean some of that up here now that we've captured our MIDI file. So here is the track that we recorded the MIDI into, and here is the region. This area in green is called the region. And you'll note that it has a bunch of MIDI information here, and then there's a break, and then the information starts here. Well, in the video, I edited out this first part because that was really my first take. But I left the camera rolling, and I left Logic Pro in recording mode and just started again. So technically speaking, this whole first part can be deleted because it was just played 1/3 through and it didn't make it. I just decided not to keep it, but I kept going. So I'm going to first delete that first part. And I'm going to put my scrubber here in the gap. And then so long as it's selected, I'll just go to Edit, Split, Region at Playhead. So now it is split. You can see there's a line here between them. If I move this, you can see there's the line here. And I'm just going to delete that first part. And then I can just kind of drag this region over so that it starts somewhere closer to the beginning, but maybe not all the way. That just keeps it oriented towards the beginning of the measure 1. Now we haven't aligned it with measures or anything like that, but I'm just straightening this out and getting a little organized. So now that I've got that in MIDI, I can simply push the space bar here or just push play here and it will play. And what you'll hear is the audio from the actual external instrument, in this case the Nord Stage 3. I haven't actually recorded any audio at this point. It's just MIDI. And if I were to remove the Stage 3 from the equation and a week later open up Logic Pro, I'd still have the MIDI, but it would say that the instrument that it's assigned to is missing. So I would be out of luck. I wouldn't be able to hear anything because I didn't capture the recording. Now I could reassign this track to an internal instrument potentially, or copy it and paste it to other tracks and do as many virtual instruments as I want, because I do have the MIDI, so I have the performance of it. I just don't have the audio. All right, but let's fix the MIDI first. That's what this part of the video is all about. And it starts off, see, I hear that as being a little too aggressive, a little too loud on that first note. In fact, it even shows me down here, and by the way, how did I get down here? I just double-clicked this region, and it brings up the piano roll by default. You can also look at the score view, but the score view on my computer is not showing all the higher notes, and I'm not exactly sure how to get it to show the higher notes. Someone might want to put a comment and tell me how to do that. But I'm going to stick with the piano roll, and that's where you can see everything. And then all I did here is move the window way up from down to the bottom all the way up to the top so I can see the full range, because this particular piece uses almost the entire keyboard. All right, so like I said, the first few notes start up a little aggressive, and they're red, meaning the velocity is very loud, versus green versus lighter blue, which is lighter to the touch. And as you can double click this note, and it should bring up this little record window showing you all the different parameters. And the one that I'm interested in here is the velocity. And every time I click it, it's going to play at 118. Now the total is 127. I can't go above 127. Even if I put 128, it goes to 127. But I want to have that note start off a lot less aggressive, so maybe somewhere in the 80 range. Now, as I hit the tab key and to tab out of that, 80 is stuck. 80, it takes 80, and then look, it turns green. So watch this. Listen to this. Do you hear how much lighter to the touch that is? The second note is also a little too aggressive. It's showing up in orange here, 104. So that first one is 80. I'm going to go with 75 on this one. And why didn't that change? Okay, it just didn't update. Okay, so we've got, now listen to it. It's going to be a lot more smooth coming in. And I think the first note should still be a little louder than 80. So let's go to 90 on that one. Okay. And the third note's a little too emphasized, so we're going to go with 80 on that one too. Yeah, that sounds more natural. So we'll keep going here and edit some more things. Not bad through here. Still has a nice feeling here. Now that has a little bit more aggression, but I was okay with that. Now there's a big mistake. Not only are the notes wrong, there's 2 notes played and they're weak. So we're going to fix them. They're right here on the keyboard. And as you touch them, you can hear the notes and you hear the volume that the notes were originally recorded at. So neither of these notes are correct. So it's a half step down. So I'm going to take this top note, and that's where it should be. It should be the F sharp. And I want it to be a little louder too. So I'm going to double click that and make sure I go down here and make that louder. In fact, why don't I bring this little floating window up closer to where we're editing so we can see it. There we go. So I think an 80 will be, that's a pretty important note. So I have that note correct. It sounds good. It's got a good velocity, but I still have this lingering accident here. So I'm going to just delete that by pushing the delete key. So I highlight it, push the delete key. Now it's gone. Great. Did you hear that? There's a wrong note in there somewhere. That note is incorrect. It was just, I must have slopped right over it. Let's take that wrong note out and listen to it. So I have no real issue with this except that there's one note that's missing from the little run-up I'm doing. See? Bum, bum, bum. I missed that note there. I don't know how I missed that note, but it did. Yep. Okay, so let's see if I'm going to look at the score here to see if I can find where that is. It's right here. We're missing a note right here. That's the note I need. Oh, where's that note? Let's copy this note. I can select any note here, and I think I can just copy it from the edit window, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, copy, and put my scrubber where I want the note to play, and paste. Yeah, I'm looking for an E. There it is. And I want it a little louder too. That's an E4, isn't it? Okay. So let's go to 80 on that one and listen to this. Yes. Okay, that's a little too loud, in my opinion. So let's go back to 70 on that. Still a little too loud. What's some of the notes playing before it? See, that's a 68. That's a 72. That's a 59. This one probably could actually be a little louder. Let's go to 65 on this one, and this one because it's... Let's go to a 65 on that one, or maybe a 60, yeah. Yeah, I like 65 better. Now I'm really kind of splitting hairs, but you kind of see the thought pattern behind this. Now, I went ahead and edited all of this in the score view just to show you can do it that way. I could have easily done it here just as well in the piano roll. But I think when it comes to putting new notes in, it might be a little easier. It depends on the situation. I found it easier just to see it visually on the staff. But if you don't read music, just stick with the piano roll. And I'm not the greatest sight reader myself, but yeah, that's good. All right, let's listen to the whole thing and see if there's any other changes that need to happen. I'm sure I could spend a few hours on this to make it, beyond reasonably perfect. And at that point, you ask yourself, well, you're going to fret over the velocities, maybe the timing and the expression, when in fact I might not have even played this piece the way the composer wrote it. I could have missed a chord interpretation. Certainly my runs are my own. The way I'm playing it, the entire thing is my own interpretation based on whatever impression I had of the piece, and then I sort of play it by ear. I just figured out the chords and say, okay, this is how I hear it. This is how I want to play it. But if you're really being critical on this whole thing is completely wrong based on the original sheet music as it was interpreted or meant to be by Rachmaninoff. All right, or Paganini, as the case may be. So, and again, I don't want to get into the lore of the piece and all that. That would take us off track. I think my one last change on this is this lower note is just a little too loud. I'm going to go with instead of a 65, I think it needs to just be a little bit less pronounced. And I'll go here and listen to that last note. I'll start a little earlier. And then this one needs to be a little quieter too, I think. And we'll let this harmony note be, that's 56 and this one's a 50. I think that's fine. Yeah, that's good for now. Okay, let's talk about getting this recorded onto an audio track. So now in order to record audio, I need to create an audio track. So I'll go up under track and say new audio track. And then just like I did with the MIDI example track, I'm going to expand this a little bit to give it some breathing room. All right, so now I've got my MIDI and my audio track. Now I need to make sure that my audio track is listening to the Nord keyboard in this case. So if I look down here in this channel, I can see that the input is 5 and 6, which represents where my Nord keyboard is plugged into on the audio interface. Now, my audio interface gives me opportunities to use various channels. It's not just one or two, it's several. So I have to tell Logic which channel to listen on. So my keyboard is plugged into 5 and 6, and that's what I've done. And then even before you do anything else, just test it, just to see if it's listening and if it can hear anything. So as I'm playing the Nord keyboard here, you can see it's indicating on the meters that I have some volume and some output. And I have the Nord keyboard volume all the way up to give it maximum capability. And the reason for that is I'm using the line inputs in the back of the audio interface, which tend to have less gain than the front inputs, at least on the Scarlett products. So your interface may vary depending on which one you're using. But the key is you want to get it as high as you can without going into any kind of red zone. That way you have a good, strong signal. Now in this case, I have a decent signal. If I need to increase the volume later after the fact, I have a little bit of flexibility here in the track itself to increase the volume. But now that we know the track is listening, now it's just a matter of letting the MIDI perform the external instrument and letting that audio come through naturally into the recording track, the audio recording track. So to do that, I'll set my audio track to record. So it has to be record enabled. You'll know that with the red R here in Logic. And in fact, it's blinking. And then I can hit record up here. And the moment I do, it will start playing the MIDI, which will trigger the keyboard, which will make the audio, which will come back into track 2. Now notice I don't have the record on the MIDI up here. We're done with the MIDI track. We already recorded that. Now we're just recording the audio and letting it play naturally. So record enabled and click record up here and sit back and watch it unfold. Now the way Logic works when it's producing its waveforms, it will show you a single waveform representing the overall sound. When you stop recording, it will break it into the stereo. Okay, now you might have noticed that I was talking over that recording, and it wasn't picking that up, even though my vocals here are going through the same audio interface. And the reason is this track is only listening on 5 and 6, but this microphone here is on track 2 or channel 2 or input 2. So there's a lot of flexibility you have here once you have an audio interface that has multiple inputs like that. All right, so there's my recording. You see that it is in stereo, in fact. And if I wanted to bring the volume up, I could do a small change here. I might also be able to adjust it in other areas in other ways. But now that this is an audio track, now we're in the digital audio space, and I no longer have direct control over changing individual notes here. I do and I don't. I can do a lot of editing to this audio. In fact, I can totally enhance it by adding effects and having all kinds of extras put on that channel to further enhance the audio. But if I were to make a major move like remove a note, add a note, change the note length, change the note velocity or volume, then all of that should be done in MIDI and then come back here to re-record. So at any time I could just bring the screen down here and say, well, I heard it again and I don't like it, so I can just delete that particular audio track and then fix my MIDI and do it all over again. Okay, now if I bring the playhead back to the beginning and play, what will happen is it will play the audio that it just recorded and it will trigger the MIDI, which will then trigger a new set of audio from the keyboard. I'll be hearing both. If you listen closely, you'll hear a phasing effect because they're both sounding. So when it is time for you to add effects or manipulate the audio, you can simply mute the MIDI like this, and that won't trigger the Nord keyboard. Or if you're at a point where you don't really want to keep the MIDI because you're happy and satisfied with the performance and you don't ever want to go back and re-edit it, that's fine. You can delete the entire MIDI track and use it for something else, or create a whole nother MIDI track or a second, in anticipation for a second track or something like that. So it's really flexible. But if you are going to listen to this back, you need to decide if you're going to listen to the audio or the MIDI. But I would recommend just muting the MIDI, getting that final audio tweaked the way you like it, and then if you're happy, you can either delete the MIDI track or keep it forever and then save your project and you're good to go. But that's essentially the gist of how you do this.
So to recap what we did here, we took a Nord Stage 3, we connected it to the computer via its USB port. That connection allowed us to record MIDI directly into Logic Pro. Once Logic Pro has the MIDI, we're able to edit that MIDI and get an excellent performance. That MIDI triggers the very same keyboard that we used to record the MIDI. It's triggering the audio. And that audio is then being fed through the audio interface. In this case, I was using a Focusrite Scarlett 18i8 interface. And I have another video on the basic connections of that. If you're interested, I'll put a link here and in the description. The interface allowed us to record the audio directly into Logic, and Logic is smart enough where it can trigger the MIDI, have the keyboard understand that MIDI, send the audio back into Logic, all in the same motion with one simple record button. I clicked record on the audio track, and the MIDI just played, and it was magic. We were creating magic from MIDI. All right, hopefully you learned some things from that. Feel free to share this video with some friends or people who might benefit from it. Feel free to give it a like and a thumbs up. And of course, subscribe if you aren't already subscribed, if you're interested in this sort of thing. Thanks for joining me on this video, and we'll catch you on the next one.